Hey, girlfriend, you know who you are. You have big, big dreams. You want to write a book, stand on a TED Talk stage, be a life coach offering wisdom from your RV in Montana, a cafe in Barcelona, or a beach chair in Tulum. Your other girlfriends and your family, they don't always get your biz savvy. Why do you want to leave your JOB? Because you're a C.A.T.S, aka coach, author, thought leader, and speaker. Meet other change makers like yourself and find out how they make it happen. This is the Big Meow podcast.
Hey, cats. I'm here with Valerie Alexander. Hi, Valerie.
Hi, Kristen.
So I love your topic, speak happiness. Boy, we all need more happiness in the world today.
It's true. It started as a happiness platform, and then now it's become happiness and inclusion, because those are my two highest priorities. I think everybody would be better off if we had more happiness and more inclusion, primarily in our workplaces, but everywhere else as well.
So what is the key to more happiness?
Well, really, personal happiness. The book I wrote called Happiness as a Second Language structures various things you can do to just add happiness to your life. But I'm going to share with you the primary verb of happiness. The action you want to take is respect. If you respect yourself and you show respect for others at all times, you're just going to naturally be happier, that you won't get knocked off your game. And the other key is to know that you have a happiness baseline, that we're not happy all the time. It's not possible, but you can be a happy person all the time. You just have to know how to get back to your happiness baseline when you get knocked off, when you're having the less happy emotions. Just know that you'll bounce back and raise your baseline as much as you can.
That's an interesting idea that we need a happiness baseline. I mean, how do we determine what our happiness baseline is?
It's not really something you want to assess for yourself. And I don't really even think we need to be
How can I be happier?
Yes. Well, here's a good way to be happier, is to stop doing things that make you unhappy.
Okay,
I
well,
think a
that's
lot of
obvious,
people,
right?
yeah, get the unhappiness out of your life is a good way to
Right.
start. But remind yourself every day, just first off, remind yourself you're a happy person. Even if it's not true when you say it, saying it gets it closer to being true. Saying it bumps up that baseline. You're building neural pathways. All the work I do is based on brain science. I work on the brain science of happiness. I work on the brain science of equity and inclusion. And the brain science behind happiness is pretty fascinating. We can build our own neural pathways. So even saying I'm a happy person frequently builds that neural pathway, even if it's not true when you're saying it. Ending your day by looking back at 5 things that made you happy that day. Or better yet, if you're in that unhappy moment, if you're unhappy, you feel like your shoulders get tense, you're grouchy, rattle off 5 things that are making you happy in that moment. And if you can refocus on that, I'm happy there's a roof over my head. I'm happy that I have, a little beverage right here. I'm happy that I'm talking to you. The things that we can rattle off that make us happy can refocus us. And, don't take yourself so seriously when you're getting upset and
Now that can be
spiraling.
kind of hard for some of us, right? Like, seriously, it's funny. I love what you're saying because it's so much about the perspective, right? It's like, what are we looking at in our lives? And I think we need to remind ourselves that probably most of our lives are going pretty good. Like, we're not really having these epic problems. And a lot of the problems that we perceive are so far outside of our everyday experience, but I think we pick up a lot of stuff from the external environment, whether it's social media, the news feed, something that's going on at the office or with a client in their life. How do we kind of turn that lens back to ourselves and stay in that zone?
I think it's really important to focus on what is. Like, we spend a lot of time focusing on what we want, what we should be doing, but if you stop and say, take a deep breath. First off, deep breath is one of the best things you can do for your body and your spirit. Just anytime you feel anything going on, just stop and take a deep breath. If that doesn't get you there, take 2 more. And then ask, what is? And when you figure out what is and get yourself out of the future, get yourself out of the anxiety, get yourself out of creating things that aren't actually there. When you ask what is, you can see where you are. And most of us, like you just said, are in a pretty good place.
It's funny. I think about happiness, just sharing one of my own stories. So I used to work in TV news. And I always kept thinking like, I'll be really happy when I get a job in a bigger market. Like, so I'm just kind of paying my dues here. And this is bad. But I didn't think that like I had to apply to 90 stations to get into this station, to get this promotion, that I had this great spot. I kept thinking, oh, when I get to that bigger market, then I'm really, really going to be happy, and it's interesting because I've noticed this pattern. It's like, well, maybe I want to go live in Portugal. And so when I can live in Portugal, then I'm really going to be happy. It's kind of that future set point. And I think now I understand, being a little bit older, that has robbed me of a lot of present moment happiness.
And not just that, it's also closed doors to things that could have been amazing. When
Right.
you start saying, oh, if I could only get to a bigger market, I would be happier. And then an opportunity opens up to move laterally to a market of the same size, or even to a smaller market that would have actually been amazing, but you close that door. Or I'll be happy when I live in Portugal. And then you have the opportunity to move, I don't know, to Dallas. But
Right.
so you're like, I'm not taking that. I'm still waiting for that Portugal move. Well, this is my favorite saying, and here's a great tip on happiness. We don't get to see the alternate timeline. We don't get to see the timeline on which we made a different decision, on which we had a different outcome. And the greatest creative writing we do is when we construct the story on the alternate timeline. Oh, if I'd married that person right now, I would have kids and a career. I'd be so happy. Or if I had quit that job when it was making me miserable, I would instead be, owning my own business and flourishing. If you want to do good creative writing, create the negative on the alternate timeline. Oh, if I had quit that job and I would have wound up losing my home and not having health insurance. You know what I mean? Don't write the
Right. No,
life
it
is
can
better
go.
on the
There's so
alternate
many
timeline story.
scenarios.
Yeah. Right.
And it's kind of like the life that you're living now is actually the life that you're meant to be living. I mean, there is that whole universal, you're exactly where you need to be in this moment. But it's really powerful. I think I'm always going to remember what you said right now. It's striking me as this whole concept of closed doors. And, I feel like sometimes we close doors because we're just trying to keep ourselves safe. And there's so many options out there. And we're like, gosh, if I consider all of them, some of them are more scary than others. And I do feel like it's like maybe a coping mechanism. I don't know. This was my younger self. I was in TV like 20 years ago, but I just remember that time, I had this office overlooking the intercoastal waterway. It was absolutely gorgeous. It was super fun. And I just couldn't wait to leave.
Right. Right.
It's just funny. It's just funny, I think, a lot of times. So I love what you're saying about writing that other narrative. So what else? What else keeps us in, our happy space?
Show up. Honestly, I think my whole career has been dictated by just showing up.
Yeah.
And I think people think they have to have some master plan, or they have to, like, if you have kids, just show up for your kids. That's all they need. Just show up, just be there. The very first job I had out of school, I was a corporate securities lawyer. The job I sort of fell backwards into.
Impressive.
Too long a story. Well, it's too long a story to go into, but I fell backwards into being a corporate securities lawyer because I got staffed on my first IPO, and I sat in the room hoping somebody would say what the letters IPO stood for.
Oh God.
And
I
5
love
weeks
it.
later, I was running that deal by myself. Because if you just show up and keep your eyes open and your mouth shut and don't announce to everybody that you don't know what you're doing, you can learn what you're doing pretty quickly, and you can get really good at it really quickly. It's that self-talk of, I don't belong here, I'm not good enough. Silence that and just show up at whatever is open to you. If you show up for it, and you don't have to think, people say, think I got this. You don't have to think that. Don't think anything. Just show up, be present.
Be in the space, pay attention, kind of absorb what comes to you. You're going to digest it. You're going to process it. It's so funny. I remember, I have to share this story with you because it's back to that whole TV thing. Is I had an opportunity to be an intern at this station in Phoenix. And I thought, I'm just going to show up every day. I'm going to have story ideas. And everyone else was showing up in flip-flops, but I showed up like dressed and ready to go out and do a news story. And like literally within a month and a half, they're like sending me out to go do all these news stories. And I was the unpaid intern, but I showed up every single day and I was dressed and ready to go. And I think that that is such, what you're talking about is so much about how we need to just show up for ourselves and watch the doors open, because we're just claiming that space that is provided to us.
There's another fantastic quote from the first Scottish expedition to I think, Antarctica, where, and I'm blanking on the name of the explorer, but he said, everyone thought we weren't doing anything. Everyone thought when we were leading up to the expedition, we were just wasting our time, but we had done something enormous. We decided to go. And once you make the decision, all manner of providence moves to enable that decision. And I've seen evidence of that in my life so many times. When you just decide and you firmly decided, you are amazed at how many mountains get moved out of your way, or how much support shows up out of the blue. If you aren't getting, if you're still having obstacles and you're not having support, it's because you haven't decided yet.
Okay, that's super powerful as well too. I do think that we have to make a decision in our lives to show up for ourselves, the things that we care about, even if we're not sure if they're going to work, or in the case of the Antarctica expedition, if we're going to survive, But yeah, that's amazing. So talk to us a little bit about your book, Happiness is a Second Language, or As a Second Language.
As a second language. It came from the idea that if I wanted to start speaking Greek, I wouldn't read one book about Greek and be like, okay, well, now I can speak.
I'm an expert.
I'm an expert.
You might be, though.
We do this for a lot of things that we want to change in ourselves. We think, I'm going to read an article about this, that'll change me, or I'll listen to a podcast. No, if you want to change something about yourself, think of it like you're learning a new language. It takes years and practice and step by step and multiple exposures to it, and surrounding yourself with people who are native speakers. And so I wrote Happiness as a Second Language as a language textbook. I never read a single other book about happiness. I read probably a dozen language textbooks to learn, how do you teach someone a new language? And then, so it starts out very simple, very basic, saying you're happy, counting the things in your life that make you happy, finding happy colors. That's the basic stuff. Then we get into the much deeper stuff, the verbs and nouns of happiness: respect, release the things that are still harming you and keeping you from being happy. Remember, how to remember the happy times, because our brain imprints negative images 7 times more strongly than it imprints positive images.
You said something that is interesting to me about releasing, and also want to add to that, boundaries. I mean, how important is it to let go of the things that are toxic, or not let things in that interfere with our ability to just be happy in the moment? And how do we do that?
It's super hard. I mean, it is really hard, because the things that come into our space that are most harmful to us are often the things we have no way of getting away from. The toxic boss, the toxic parent.
I was just going to say
the toxic family.
My mother.
Yeah.
Right.
And so setting the boundary, this is something I say a lot, and I don't want it to be insensitive, but people treat you the way you train them to treat you.
That's a
and how they're treating you is working for them. And if you don't want that behavior to continue, you have to make it stop working for them. I do a lot of corporate work on happiness, which sounds crazy, but companies would save literally hundreds of billions of dollars if they would focus more on the happiness of their workforce.
It doesn't seem like a priority, Valerie. I'm just saying. I don't hear them saying, oh, my ROI is linked to my employees' happiness.
And yet, if it were a line item in the profit and loss statement,
right,
the CEO would make it the top priority, and not just turnover and absenteeism of your employees. There are 18 distinct metrics across which your numbers are much lower if your employees are unhappy. You have more workplace accidents, you have more workers' compensation claims, you have more theft, you have more bullying, you have higher liability. It's crazy.
Chaos.
But so I go through and I train companies how to focus on the happiness of their workforce, which is super easy and costs nothing. But the biggest thing I talk about is your toxic employees. Companies that will allow a toxic employee, or worse, a toxic manager.
Out of here.
Yeah.
I know they never fire them. They
Never.
always leave the crummy ones around. Like there's always like the super toxic, snarling, snarky employee that's evergreen. And
Right.
everybody else is moving around them and like moving off, getting fired, you know, getting moved on. I don't get that at all.
If I have exercises I will do with companies where I know they're not getting rid of the toxic person. And I say, okay, I want you to make a list of every single valuable person you lost in the last 2 years, and then just draw a chart for how closely they had to work with that toxic person. And then pretty quickly they start realizing,
Yeah,
hey,
it's pretty scary, right? So you did a TED Talk, how to outsmart your unconscious bias.
Yes.
Give me quick cliff notes around that.
I was the CEO of a tech company, and I was asked to give a TED Talk about being a female CEO over 40 of a tech startup.
What was that like?
You know what? It was exciting and big fun and amazing what we were building and what we were doing. But there were big challenges. I went to a venture capital event, which is how you raise money, where literally there were 3 people standing to talk to the venture capitalist who'd been speaking, and it was a man and me and another man, and the VC was talking to that man. And literally turned immediately and talked to the other man. He didn't even see me.
You're like, hello, I'm here.
Didn't even see me standing there. So what I had done with my venture capital presentations, because the company was a relationship communication startup. It was fantastic what we did, but it started as a product I built for my best friend and his husband. So it was 2 men who were married. That was always a little jarring to people when I mentioned my friend and his husband. And so I needed to get people out of the space of thinking that there was something odd because, hello, I'm man's husband. Right. I know. Right. And this was, 8 years ago. So that was the first part. The second part, once we got the funding, we were going to bring on a board a CFO who was Black. And that's not very common. You don't see a lot of Black CFOs. And then, of course, I'm the CEO and I'm a woman. So I created this visualization exercise to do with the investors. And I would do this visualization exercise, sort of fun. I'm like, hey, our company's based on brain science. Do you guys want to play a fun brain science game to start with? And I would do the visualization exercise where they weren't visualizing 2 men as married. They weren't visualizing a Black person in that situation as a pilot of a plane. They weren't visualizing a woman as the CEO of a tech company. And once we got that out of the way, I could say to them, all right, now that you see what obstacles might be coming up, can we have an open conversation? And it was always a very successful way to start. And so when I was asked to give a TED Talk, I was talking with they have speaker coaches for TED. I was talking with my speaker coach about being the CEO of a tech company. And I brought up this visualization and she said, oh, please share that. Please share that with our audience. So that's what opens my TED Talk, is that visualization exercise. And that has been co-opted and used all over the world now. I see people send me videos of some other conference where somebody opens with my visualization exercise. I used to try to cling to it and stop that from happening.
I love it. It's taken on a life of its own.
It is in the world. And
here you go, my gift to the world.
Exactly. And it's so useful. It's so helpful that it would be ridiculous for the only people who ever used it, the only people who ever saw it, be people who were in my presence. So
what's next for you?
I'm speaking around the world. It's been amazing. I just got back from Spain where I was working with a major.
My favorite place.
Oh, it was wonderful.
I love it.
And it was a German company that had their executive retreat in Mallorca. And I was talking to them about equity and inclusion. And I've been doing a lot of equity and inclusion work with really some of the largest companies in the world, which has been phenomenal. And then I also do happiness work. Conferences primarily. I'm working with the military and with some police forces. So that's been really rewarding. The next step for me is to create an online platform for the most valuable areas of what I do. So to focus on where change can be achieved with basic management training for creating happier workplaces, for delivering more effective and less biased performance reviews. These are some of the topics I cover really in detail. And so I want to create an online platform for that, again, so that people can have the benefit of it without me having to be present there. because there's
We
only
need
so
to
much
leverage you. There's not enough Valerie to go around.
Exactly.
So where can we find you when you're not on an airplane?
Speakhappiness.com. On an airplane is pretty much where you're finding me these
That's
days.
where I'm living
But
these days.
you can find me at speakhappiness.com. And then I have a giveaway for everybody who's listening if they want. I created a workbook called 5 Policies That Outsmart Bias in Your Company. They're super effective, very simple things to implement. And if anybody wants that, they can go to speakhappiness.com/inclusion. So if you go to speakhappiness.com/inclusion, you can download the workbook, 5 Policies to Outsmart Bias in Your Company.
Valerie, thank you so much for being on the Big Meow. It was super fun.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Big Meow podcast, sponsored by C.A.T.S Network. If you liked what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe and share this podcast with your friends. You can also join our network filled with positivity and possibility. Visit www.catsnetworking.com to join us and learn more, together with your magical, motivated, and mystical new friends at C.A.T.S Network. Let's transform 1 million lives with your message. Are you feeling isolated sitting at home in your PJs? Or perhaps you're tired of the comfy sweatpants with holes in them that are hidden just below the camera? I mean, you could puke at the thought of another day of Zoom meetings and reporting to your BOSS. Do you want freedom from your home office desk or the office cubicle? Do you want freedom from your current career? Or are you frustrated that your online biz dreams are going nowhere? It's all too overwhelming. Where do you start? All the tech, the choices, and your message. Yep, I said your message, your brand, your voice. What is it? Do you even know what that means? Do you need a biz coach but don't want to invest the big bucks? Let's face it, being a solopreneur is lonely, but you don't have to do it alone. And here's a solution. Join C.A.T.S Network. C.A.T.S Network is a woman-only membership community exclusively available to you, the life coach or executive coach, the author, the thought leader, or the public speaker. If you identify with this list or want to work on adding some of these to your skill set, C.A.T.S is the place for you. Check us out at www.catsnetworking.com. That's C.A.T.S networking.com. Because let's face it, cats are better together.